This is Heartrepreneur Radio, maximizing your personal and business results by leading with your heart. With your host, Terri Levine. Listen every week as Terri tackles the topics that will help you become a successful heart-centered entrepreneur. Be sure to read the blog posts at www.heartrepreneur.com/blog. Come back often and add this show to your favorite RSS feed or subscribe in iTunes. You can also follow Terri on Twitter at MentorTerri and on Facebook.com/Heartrepreneur Terri Levine. And now here's Terri.
Hello and welcome to Heartrepreneur Radio and TV show with Terri Levine. I'm your co-host, Val McGallant, and I'm excited to be here today. You can connect with Terri, me, and other like-minded heart-based business owners in the Heartrepreneurs with Terri Levine Facebook group. So go check it out. And as always, if you like this show, please be sure to hit that like button. And we always love those 5-star reviews. So our quote for today is, remember that what you are feeling does not reflect your reality. We cannot always control the thoughts that come into our minds, but we can control the thoughts that we dwell on. Les Brown. So today's show topic is investing in the emerging field of consciousness, spirituality, and mental health. Our special guest this week is Charlie Hartwell. Charlie is the managing partner of Bridge Builders Collaborative, a group of investors who have been investing for the last 9 years in startups in the mindfulness, behavioral health, consciousness, and spirituality space. We'll discuss what's happening in that field and Charlie's approach to supporting entrepreneurs in the space through a heart-centered approach. Welcome to the show, Charlie.
Thanks for having me. It's with a last name like Hartwell. It's pretty cool when you get invited to the Heartrepreneur Radio.
Definitely.
So well, that's amazing.
And I love that it is a heart-centered approach that you are focused on. I mean, your name kind of makes it mandatory. So tell me a little bit about how you started focusing on the startups in mindfulness, behavioral health, and consciousness in that spirituality space. How did you end up in that direction?
Yes, my wife actually got me into this space. I describe her as the wisdom of our family. She's been in this field for almost 40 years, and in different ways. And she was connected to something called the Mind and Life Institute, which was co-founded by a Chilean neuroscientist, Stanford MBA, and the Dalai Lama to help to prove to the Western mind what the Eastern heart already knew about the practices, the contemplative practices. So they set off to sort of validate the science behind compassion, mindfulness, etc. My wife got me involved in that organization, and through that I met the 3 visionary partners who were asking the question whether or not there would be anything to invest in to help bring that science to scale. And that was about 9 years ago. And they sent me off with a question, if there would be anything to invest in. And remarkably, at the time it was hard to find things to invest in. And now I've probably looked at, over 1,200 companies.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. So what kind of businesses have you been looking at recently?
So recently, so our first chapter, we were investing in things like mindfulness, digital health, digital therapeutics, behavioral health platforms. And our partners got to a place where we could sort of showcase that on our platforms, 100 million people were meditating that weren't meditating before. And mindfulness had come into the mainstream, and digital therapeutics were being, approved in the US by the FDA. And our partners, actually, my wife said to me, Charlie, you've been investing in the gateway drugs to higher levels of consciousness. It's time to go deeper. And at the same time, my partners were sort of saying the same thing. And so now we're looking at companies that provide deeper levels of invitations to actually not just sort of slow down and calm the mind, but to actually change behavior, to actually provide more opportunities for conscious awakening, deeper levels of sort of mental health platforms, and social wellness is another area that we're looking at.
Wow, that's amazing. I love the direction, because mindfulness, I think, is something that belongs everywhere. Just to put it simply, it belongs everywhere. It belongs in business. It belongs in our homes. It belongs in our faith. It belongs everywhere. And the fact that there are entrepreneurs out there in this field expanding it, and then you've got your group that is supporting them so that it can grow, I think is absolutely amazing. I love it. So tell me, if one of our listeners is in this kind of a field, what are some of the important things that they need to start paying attention to? Are there specific things that they need to get ready for as they expand their businesses?
Yeah, I think a key thing that we look at is, if you have a business centered in the space, the question is, what choices are you going to make to get it out into the world? So, and then how is your team aligned with those choices? For instance, you could be a consumer model, or you could be a business to business model, or you could be more of a medical model. And really having a clear understanding of where you want to focus your efforts on your business creates, that sets in motion how you're going, what you do to promote your product, what features you might have in your product, what are the requirements of the market, et cetera. So I think that's a really key question, is to say, where do you want people to be using this product?
Right. Okay. So honestly, if we're looking at, it doesn't matter what it is that you're building. Those are some of the fundamental things that you need to pay attention to. And so really operating in the mindfulness field, you still need to approach it like a standard business to a certain degree, and just keep your marketing, you have to have the appropriate team, you have to have the appropriate strategies, and all of those kinds of things as well.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I think why mindfulness has been able to come into the Western world at this time is because science validated it, validated the efforts behind it, but then smart people took an approach of how to market it so that it would be an invitation for people. So it takes from, at least as an investor, it takes a traditional business approach to create any type of scale, but it also necessitates a great vision and a commitment to being really true to the practice, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, if we're talking about mindfulness and what product, services, and that kind of thing are possible in that field, you really need to be immersed in it and allowing that to be what's guiding the growth of those businesses. Anyways, I mean, you can't be a mindfulness business and not practice mindfulness. So
yeah, that's true. And in fact, one of the things that we look for in any company in this space is whether the CEO of the company actually is committed to the practice, and whether they've integrated the practice. We really look for people that are integrated and aren't just at the sort of, way beginning of their journey, but they've actually brought this into their lives. They're committed to it. They're committed themselves to going deeper into improving themselves or being more connected to themselves. So it's absolutely essential for both, for the entrepreneurs and for their team.
Absolutely. So behavioral health, what do you mean by behavioral health so that I can understand more of what it is you're doing?
Yeah. Sometimes behavioral health and in mental health, could be, at least the way that I look at it, could be looked at similarly. So there's a whole sort of behavioral or mental health system in Canada and in the US, and they might operate differently, but there is, I look at it and say, how are we focused on improving sort of the inner experience of people who might, who have trauma, who have stories and conditioning that they're living in. And so there is a whole system, at least in our country, that, is around helping those people, that it combines, sort of a therapist network. It combines, insurance, psychiatrists, et cetera.
Okay. So, but taking from my own experiences, I mean, I've experienced abuse on in a variety of different ways. I had a concussion from a motor vehicle accident, and one of the things that I tapped into to support the healing from mainly from the concussion, but I'm sure it supported the other areas that I experienced as well, was functional neurology blended with chiropractor. And I also used it to support another family member with respect to some trauma that they experienced. And it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. So what I'm hearing is, and I'm not necessarily that you guys are supporting that particular business model, but that your intention is that things like that do support our mental well-being, our emotional well-being, our physical well-being, and mind, body, spirit. Those are the kinds of things that you guys are supporting to grow and expand in our world. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. I'm on target. Okay. That's very cool. That is very cool. So what's been the most interesting project that you've played with over the last couple of years?
Well, there's so many of them. I'm going to actually, can I do two of them?
Yes.
So the first one is an app called Insight Timer. An Insight Timer is an app where 10,000 spiritual teachers, scientists, mindfulness and yoga practitioners connect with a community of about 20 million people from all around the world, teaching in 44 languages, because the teachers are from, have 44 different languages. It's a platform that's free. So there are something like 60,000 free meditations. It is a platform where teachers are supported in two ways. One is they can get their word out to their word and their message out to a larger global audience than they could do on their own. And second, the platform shares 50% of its revenue with teachers. So it's a free platform, but you can buy special features, et cetera, courses if you want to. And what I love about it is that you feel as though you're part of a global, spiritual community of people that are seeking, and you can access some of the, leading teachers on the planet. And the way the platform is built, anyone can access it. So it doesn't require you to buy anything to be able to get a lot of remarkable content. So it's accessible to everyone. And it's grown naturally. They've grown to a community of 20 million without ever spending marketing dollars. So I love that one. And it's really fun to watch that, is to support the team to grow. It's an Australian company. And the second one is actually a Canadian company called True Love. And I pinch myself that I have this opportunity to invest in companies, with a name like True Love. It's so cool. What I love about this company is that there's a female entrepreneur named Bree Code and a great team around her that came together to really try to bring a revolution in gaming. Gaming has always been built on a very masculine approach. It's about fight or flight. All the games are about winning, achieving. This is about a feminine approach. Bree is one of the leading female game designers in the world. And she's out to, provide the experience that's much more about tend and befriend than it is about fighting or winning. So it actually, it's all programmed to, to interact with a different region in the brain than all of the gaming that's been built, basically in our society. So I think that's really cool. And I think it's a very stressed out world. And I think games can enhance that stress, to have someone that's building, games that are about community, tending and befriending. That's pretty awesome. And, there've been a couple million downloads of that app. So I love it. That's a fun one to work with.
That is really cool because, it's taking a collaborative approach to gaming versus a competitive approach to gaming. So that is really cool. That is really cool. So I want to make sure that our listeners, because, with Heartrepreneur Radio, we're going to have a lot of people who are in this field. At least I think there's going to be a lot of people in this broad spectrum of business opportunities and even curiosity as to some of the businesses that you guys have been supporting and helping to grow. How can our listeners reach you?
Two ways. My wife and I, our business is called the Shifted Institute, and the website is shifted.com. And the group that I work for, the Bridge Builders Collaborative, that is just bbcollaborative.com. And there you can find the companies that we invest in, the approach that we take, who our partners are, etc.
That's really cool. Thank you. So I'm going back into my memory banks, lots of years, and I remember purchasing a game that allowed, I'm not sure if it was biofeedback or something like that, but it had these things for my fingers, and it supported me to be able to use my mind to manipulate things on my computer screen, control my breathing so that I could bring those things down. I wish I could remember what it was called. Are there things like that are out there still?
Yes. There's two companies that I'm thinking about that you might be referring to, and neither of them comes to mind. Yes, there are companies like that out there. For instance, another Canadian company that we've invested in is called Interaxon. It's the Muse brain sensing headband. So it's really it's both a meditation assistant, but it's also becoming more of a healthcare tool. So you sit, you put it fits on like a pair of sunglasses. It reads your brain waves in real time and gives you feedback as to whether you're in a calm or focused state. And it helps you to train yourself to be in that state, more, as you move forward. There are incredible amounts of products and services that are doing sort of what you're describing. They're reading, different body measurements. They're, they're stimulating your brain. VR does some of the same kind of things. And so there's incredible amount of companies that are sort of focused on the area that you're talking about.
Okay, that sounds super fascinating because, especially, as a business builder who's not necessarily in that field, but of course, like I find it super fascinating. Tools like that could really support me to stay in that grounded place where the creativity flows, and be able to build my business more from that mindfulness perspective and be more effective. So that is super fascinating. I'm going to have to go check that out.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think the early phase of our exploration and investment in this field was really about sort of the mind and the brain. Mm-hmm. And we're on this show, which is really focused on the heart. And I think, as my wife describes, it's time to actually live below the neck. It's time to be embodied. It's time to be connected to our heart. And I'm not sure always that some of these, that some of these practices are not just built to just calm the brain. And my vision is that we actually live embodied lives, and we're not disconnected from our heart. We live with our hearts open. So I can say that in this show, and and I know you'll appreciate that.
Well, absolutely. I think, and to be quite honest, I think when the mind is calm, that's when we hear the heart speak, right? That it allows that connection, and allows us to turn up the volume on our heart when the mind is calm. Because when the mind is scattered and busy, the heart is a quiet. It's that quiet voice, right? It can be that quiet voice, and when we allow our brain to calm down, we can actually hear that. I think that's also how our creativity ends up coming out too, is if that creativity comes from our heart. There's a lot of opportunity and amazing stuff that can come out for society when we allow our heart to do the speaking.
I agree with you. And, at least in my own experience, going down this journey, it was a reconnection of the heart, but it was also an invitation to go and see the walls that we might have put around our heart. So even if we're sort of connected to it, we can put walls up so that we're not vulnerable, or so that we don't let love in, or so that we don't fully express our love because we're afraid of it, or whatever that is. So it's not, to me, a lot of people have built up walls around that, and not for reasons that might have made sense at the time, but part of that is breaking those walls down so that we can actually live more connected to the heart and be expressing that. And then I think the outcomes are similar to what you were describing.
Mm-hmm. I think that's when we think of mindfulness, just because it starts with the word mind doesn't mean it's just our brain, and doesn't mean it's just thought. But I think mindfulness is that, I think mindfulness would be the conduit between the brain and the heart, right? That pipeline.
Yeah, I think it depends on how it's practiced and how it's taught. I think for a lot of people, it's really been about, oh my God, I'm really stressed. Oh my God, I can't. I'm just thinking all the time, and it's just this sort of calming and observing thoughts. And I sort of look at that differently than I might look at, like, I think there's mindfulness, and then I think there's heartfulness.
Okay.
I think there's a connection between the two of those things. But as a Hartwell, for me, I think at least in how it's come into our society, it's been really mindfulness has been really focused on the brain, and it doesn't necessarily. I haven't seen people who become more heart-centered because of it. They actually have to, there's a practice to actually, sort of go away from the thoughts and into the, more grounded and embodied, which we were talking about earlier.
Right. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Just because we can calm the brain doesn't necessarily mean that we activate the heart.
Correct.
Right. Okay. I get that. So with respect to the work that you're doing, are you finding you're heading more into technology, or are there other areas that are being expanded on as well?
We've tended to invest in software businesses, so it's been technology. I've looked at a lot of different business, in person, sort of, events or physical spaces. We've looked at a lot of hardware companies. We've made one hardware investment, but we've tended to focus on software because we feel that it's the best way to create scale. And our investment thesis is really about how do we bring these types of practices to global scale. And it just seems like software is the most efficient way of doing that at global scale.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense, because you want to create the largest impact you possibly can. It's not necessarily the product might be fantastic, but when you're looking at it from an investor perspective, you're looking at creating the bigger impact.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, I want to again make sure that our listeners know how to reach you. Can you share your websites again?
Yeah. Shiftit.com is the Shiftit Institute, and bbcollaborative.com is the website for Bridge Builders Collaborative. Also, I'm on Twitter quite a bit, and that's another way of and LinkedIn, and those are other ways of connecting with me.
Awesome. We never did talk very much about Shiftit. Can you just briefly tell me a little bit about?
Yeah, so this is my wife and my business. Our vision is to, ignite consciousness, expand human potential, and create paradigm shifts. And we both do that in different ways. Most of my time is spent, doing the work that I do at the Bridge Builders Collaborative. My wife's a partner at that collaborative, but she also, does work. She's a teacher. Her work is on Insight Timer. Her name is Maureen Pelton, and she is trained in like 20 different modalities. So she works with some clients. She does it, she does advising, etc. And just we have this collective vision, which is expressed through Shiftit, which is our business.
Awesome. I wanted to make sure that we got that in there.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So, okay. So, do you have a last thought that you would love to share with our business creative audience?
Yeah, I think, I get ignited by entrepreneurs with a vision. And what I find, increasingly is that, when people really get connected to what impassions them, what turns them on, that gets manifested in different ways. And it can take some courage to get there, because society might be telling you, you can't do that, or, you should be this, or, there's a lot of sort of constraints that some people have, based on the communities they came from or their family systems, et cetera. And I just encourage, folks that you have this one precious life. What do you want to do with that one precious life? And it doesn't mean, being an entrepreneur necessarily, but if that's your passion, then go for it. And when you set out on that journey, you'll never know what it's going to look like. It will have twists and turns. It's all sort of a learning, at least in my experience. So I just encourage people to get on the journey and to have the courage to take the risk, to live, to connect with their purpose, and to live to it.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that I agree with you. I think it's super important. And I think a lot of our entrepreneurs, and I think a lot of our listeners, are the people who want to be entrepreneurs that haven't taken that leap of courage quite yet. So thank you so much for your time today, Charlie. I really appreciate your time. And I love what you and your group and your wife are up to with kind of building our world consciousness in a heart way. So thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you who are listening, I hope you found value in this today, and do check out the websites that we shared with you for Charlie. And also remember to check out Facebook, Entrepreneurs with Terri Levine on Facebook. You will be able to connect with a lot more heart-centered entrepreneurs and be able to connect with the people who are there to help you build your business. Thanks, and you have a fantastic day.
You've been listening to Heartrepreneur Radio, maximizing your personal and business results by leading with your heart, with your host, Terri Levine. This show is produced every week for your enjoyment and education. To make sure you never miss a single show, add us to your favorite RSS feed or subscribe in iTunes. You can also read Terri's latest blog posts at www.heartrepreneur.com/blog, or follow Terri on Twitter at MentorTerri, and on Facebook.com/ facebook.com/Heartrepreneur Terri Levine. Your questions and comments are always welcome and appreciated. Send them to Terri on either Facebook or Twitter. Thank you for listening.